Hello and welcome to episode 118 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is November 11th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hey.
So today we revisit one of my favorite topics, and that's Power Platform and SAP. We already talked about the Power Platform a few times in the past, so I'm really honored to welcome Jon Gilman to our call this week. About a year ago, Microsoft acquired ClearSoft, and by this added a lot of SAP experience to the Power Platform team. The results of this acquisition can already be seen during the Power Platform conference, and Ignite Jon and the team already released a new SAP Connector, which addresses a lot of limitations that we heard from customers from the previous connector. But it gets even better. We are in the process of delivering 25 apps and much more Power Automate flows for typical SAP scenarios. So before we hand over to Jon to learn more about these news, let's quickly, as always, take a look at some other news from this week. And I actually want to start with a GitHub announcement. So some of you might have seen there was GitHub Universe, so the annual conference, and there were tons of announcements, GitHub code spaces, and a lot of cool other things. And one thing that I just wanted to highlight was this Hey GitHub integration. So basically it's a way, and let me actually see if this works here. So you talk to GitHub and GitHub creates code directly out of this. Wait, this is annoying a little. So let me stop this again. But it's a cool thing where we show other things that you can do with AI. And if you remember, when we started GitHub Copilot, where by just writing code, it would use code completions AI and really write the code. And we had a previous episode on this as well. That was already really impressive. And what I found so fascinating is really that we see this infusion a lot in other areas. For example, in the Power Platform, where we have lots of new functionalities where we really help the business users now with this AI-infused technologies. And for me, it was just fun to see that GitHub is doing some new additional stuff here to write code without the keyboard. So with this, let me go to the next topic, and that's you might remember Martin Pankratz had started a blog post series about integration services, how can you connect SAP data to other systems, and now we have another blog post from a partner actually about migrating your SAP PI PO flows to cloud native. And that's actually a really interesting blog post, again here from the partner Quebec, because I mean, a lot of customers are still using PIPO, obviously. This is when you're on premise, I think that was the go-to solution, and we'll cover that actually, or some related topic in a second as well. But what Christoph here outlines is how can you actually migrate these services to a cloud native scenario, and obviously one of the options is the CPI, the Cloud Platform Integration Suite, but there are also other solutions. So you could also use this with Azure integration services. And basically what Christoph outlines here are some of the things that you can consider, that you can use to migrate your scenarios. And they actually have one really cool offering, and that's a converter that helps you to convert your existing PIPO mappings. Keep in mind, you might have invested a lot of time, a lot of energy in these mappings for your on-premises environments, how you can convert these mappings into XSLTs that you can then obviously also use in other integration services. So if you are using PIPO, if you're thinking about migrating these solutions to the cloud, then definitely take a look at this blog post from Quebec. Moving on, that's one topic, Goran, that you just brought up.
Yeah, I mean, just look the red text. Very important, actually, we missed to mention last time, but HANA Large Instances are in sunset mode, and there is no acceptance of the new customer. And this is really very important part, because simply VMs are so huge that in these days we don't need it anymore. Basically a HANA Large Instance, and there's actually a less request as well. and there is no need to have them. So important is no new customer will come there and will be accepted. Of course, service will be provided for the existing customer. However, of course, I would definitely strongly recommend that existing HLI customer think on moving to the VMs. I mean, the rest of the VMs is anyway in the rest of the SAP layers in the VMs. But they should really rethink to move to the VMs simply to get, I mean, you get much more other benefits and flexibility by running HANA in the VMs. And especially, again, those VMs are huge and getting bigger and bigger. So nobody would, I believe, need such a huge physical machines for the HANA load.
And I think just, I mean, you mentioned it, we started with the HANA Large Instances simply because VMs weren't that big. So a few years ago, when you wanted to have 12 terabytes or 24 terabytes of memory, then these HANA Large Instances were the only things that was possible across any hyperscaler. And in the meantime, we talked about this also before, we now have almost 24 terabyte virtual machines available, really with live productive customers on it as well, fully certified and stuff like that. So there's really no need to go to these HANA Large Instances anymore.
Correct. Yeah. An interesting small point is here. It's about clustering on Linux, on pacemaker, the storage in Linux cluster as well, and Windows cluster. I always have to mention. The way how things works is we have two machines with the clustering. We have in front of some kind of internal load balancer, and that load balancer is actually forwarding requests to the active node. The way how it knows where to forward is basically something on the active node has to sit, a resource, and answer on a ping. So that's actually a cluster resource, one of the cluster resource. On Linux is one of the pacemaker cluster resource, and Windows is a Windows cluster resource, and it's only active on a live node. That resource in the past we used actually a netcat, so it's a kind of process, and shows some limitations, and then it was replaced with a so-called socket. And now the new stuff, which is actually recommended, is Azure-LB resource agent. Okay, so customer strongly recommended to migrate to it. It's a Red Hat, it's a SLES as well. Okay, this is the SLES article, but they are kind of strongly recommended to migrate it simply because it's more reliable. Yeah, although they can still use as they are mentioning the socket. If this is already configured as per article, and the blue part, they're important. It's the one which is important, right? Things are, I mean, continuously improving, and pace is very fast. Unfortunately, there are many of those moving parts, and sometimes customer cannot track it, all of them. And they forget to do it, or they don't realize that there is something new. So, okay, we use this opportunity just to bring a bit more awareness to such a small but important pieces. Simply, HA isn't important, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the all from my side.
Cool, thank you. Good, then moving on, I just want to highlight one topic again. I mean, we had Aaron Stern on the podcast sometime before, where he talked about the Azure Center for SAP Solutions, and Himanshu just created another blog post talking a little about what it is about, how you can use it, and just getting you started. Again, for me, ACSS is one of the newest cool things that we have on Azure for SAP, because it really makes your Azure instance aware of SAP. And with this information, I think that's what this screenshot here talks about. With this, now that Azure knows that this is your SAP system, we can very easily integrate into stuff in the SAP deployment automation framework, in monitoring, in Sentinel, in lots of other services. And that's what I think we're just getting started. So if you have still not yet checked out Azure Center for SAP Solutions, now's the time. So one last thing, and that's just from nostalgic reasons from my side. When I started my SAP career, it was actually using the SAP Business Connector. So I started to connect different SAP systems, and I'm actually surprised that the Business Connector is still around. So it was released in 1999 apparently, and it's still being used by customers. So I think there were a few enhancements, but yeah, it's great to see that a product like the Business Connector is still around and still being used by customers. And when I saw this blog post, I was just reminded of my history. So I thought I definitely want to mention this one. So good with this. I mentioned in the intro there was a new announcement during Build, during the Power Platform conference, during Ignite, and as mentioned, we're extremely happy to have Jon with us today. So maybe Jon, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself, what you're doing at Microsoft, and then yeah, maybe you can show us some of the new Power Platform and SAP magic that you've been working on.
Sure. So as Holger mentioned, I was the founder of a company called ClearSoft that Microsoft acquired last year, and we were heavily focused on digital transformation and automation for SAP customers and Oracle E-Business Suite customers. Those are kind of our bread and butter areas. So when we got acquired, we began to migrate our functionality into the Power Platform and kind of performed a Frankenstein operation, so to speak, where we had to break apart our platform and then put it in other areas of the Power Platform. So you'll see changes to Power Apps, Power Automate, Logic Apps, and even Dataverse. So there's a lot of cool things coming. When we made the announcement in September that we went into public preview with all this new functionality, by far the biggest excitement was around the pre-built Power Apps that we've put on top of SAP. So we announced that we have a fully operational purchase orders app and sales orders app that will allow you to create, update, read purchase orders and flow through the entire procure to pay process in a simple, streamlined app that is obviously configurable because Power Apps is, it's a no-code BPMS solution. So you can bring in your custom fields, you can, bring in your custom drop-down values, and all of this is, can get you up and running within a matter of minutes. Our intent before we get to GA is to take the top 25 business processes in SAP and have pre-built apps very similar to this purchase orders app for, things like within the sales area, customers all the way through customer payments. So you could use this as an MDM solution within purchasing, vendor creation all the way through paying a vendor, within finance, journal entries, GL accounts, cost centers, everything needed for record to report. And then within production, if you happen to be a company that makes a product, we have production orders, materials, goods movements, all the fun stuff related to MRP. And we've designed this in a way that we are agnostic to the underlying ERP system. So our initial focus has been SAP because it's, by far the most widely used ERP system in the world. But these processes are really kind of the same regardless of what underlying ERP you're using. So our intent is to create these as generically as possible so that in subsequent phases, when we focus on Oracle E-Business Suite and PeopleSoft and a lot of the other ERPs out there, the Power App itself won't change, but the underlying integration behind the scenes may take a different path. So if you happen to be an organization that through acquisition has subsidiaries that are running, some are running SAP, some are running Oracle, we can give you a single cohesive user experience, and based on data attributes that are selected in your process, we can determine behind the scenes, does it go into Oracle, does it go into SAP, which SAP does it go into? So there's a lot of cool things you can do here. So this is by far what people were most excited about. Behind the scenes, oh, go ahead.
So sorry, that's actually a super interesting use case, because typically, to be honest, when I talk about this to customers, and you're absolutely right, when you announced this, I got so many emails from customers around this. They were super excited. But typically, I only talk about how you can use this in the context of SAP. But you're absolutely right. That's actually a pretty cool use case that with this new user interface, yes, we can connect to an SAP system. But if a customer then also has another ERP system, an Oracle system or whatever, then they could use this as the new front end for both their SAP, for their Oracle, and potentially also for their dynamic system or something like that.
Absolutely.
Cool.
So yeah, so this is really, really key for a lot of the large multinationals that have, you know, you've seen their system landscapes before, where there'll be, you know, 44 instances of SAP and 22 instances of Oracle E-Business Suite, and they're just trying to get some sort of commonality amongst all the different organizations they have across the globe. So what's really cool is kind of under the hood for any technical folks. The Power Automate flows that are powering those Power Apps. So, you know, for example, a flow to create a sales order or to approve a purchase order. Those are flowing through a new SAP connector. And we listened to our customers, and some of the big things we were hearing were, one, you know, Power Automate could not connect to a message server. And obviously, if you're a large multinational and you have a message server that's doing the load balancing across maybe 15 or 20 application servers, that's pretty critical, because, you know, if you want to put 50 or 60,000 or 100,000 users on Power Apps, you need to be able to communicate with a message server. So we've added message server support. We have a new area called a data source environment variable for SAP, where you can maintain any complex SAP system connection parameter for SNC libraries, load balancing. And our intent here is to allow your basis administrators to do this in one place within the Power Platform when you first start using it, maintain it once, and then your flow makers and your Power Apps makers can just reference this connection going forward without having to know all the, you know, the complicated things that they're not going to know anyway. They basically usually have to go back to the basis team and say, hey, what's the IP address for the message server and what port does it listen on? So setting this up once is going to pay huge dividends in the future.
Yeah, and even just to interject here with another personal experience, even if I have all the details, if I created a Power Automate flow where I not only called one BAPI, but where I called 5 BAPIs, then for each and every BAPI, I needed to enter all the server informations. I needed to enter all the things, and now I have this variable where I can just say, look, this is my SAP dev environment, which actually brings another super cool point from my point of view. So I can develop against my development environment, and once I'm ready, I do not need to go through all the different flows and update the connection string again. I can just go into the variable and say, look, now don't point to the development system anymore, but now point to the productive system. So I think that this brings much more flexibility than what we had with the previous connector.
Yeah, migrating between dev, QA, and production is going to be so much easier now. That kind of leads into one of the next cool things that we've built out. So the on-premises data gateway that listens for requests from the Power Platform and then actually connects to your SAP system to transact BAPIs. We have a new version of that, and it's taking into account not just the advanced system parameters that we just saw, but we have some new, very, very cool single sign-on functionality. So, you know, for those who've delved into this before, connecting Power Apps to SAP using single sign-on required wizardry that, you know, usually involved decades of SAP experience. So we've simplified that dramatically, and the new on-premises data gateway is very tightly integrated with Active Directory and uses Kerberos authentication. And all of that, again, is set up in an environment variable, you know, within the Power Platform, so that you set it up once and you never have to touch it ever again. So going forward, users in Power Apps will no longer be prompted with a pop-up to enter their username and password or select a data gateway, because they shouldn't. They don't know what that means. You know, there's no reason why 2,000 people should have to know that they have to select a certain data gateway. So that's all gone. That's a silent logon. By virtue of you being authenticated into your Office 365 domain, when you come into Power Apps, we then allow that Kerberos delegation to happen on the on-premises data gateway so that you don't have to do anything. You're connected to Power Apps, you're connected to your domain, you can transact data against the SAP system and still have your full audit trail. So that is huge, 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 because it's been a big pain for customers to set up a SSO.
Not only for the customers, I also experienced this firsthand because as you said, if it's not working for customers, they then reach out to Microsoft and ask for help, and then it is always a struggle to set up these single sign-on configurations. So I think this will again hugely help customers to have a single sign-on experience.
But also the flexibility to go to the on-premises, and I believe through the, as far as I know, data gateway, it's just a data gateway sitting on the on-premises. There is no need to have a VPN. There is no, it's just going outbound right on through the HTTPS, meaning it's simple and secure as well.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, having been on a lot of those support calls for single sign-on setup, I'm glad that this is happening, so we don't have those anymore.
Great.
Cool. And then as Holger mentioned, we did build a new SAP connector, and now when you pick your SAP system, you simply select it from a dropdown. So there's no more entering the IP address and the client and the system number. You're simply selecting that environment variable of type data source that has all your SAP connection parameters in there. What's really cool is we're going to be delivering prior to GA, which is in December of this year, several hundred pre-built Power Automate flows around all of these really common processes, like approving a purchase order. In this case, that's what we're looking at here. But creating a sales order, creating a vendor, creating a customer, that's all going to be there. But we're doing it in a way that's very simple now, where we have pre-delivered mappings. And you can tweak those mappings to meet your needs, but you're not having to go through and figure out, for example, when you want to create a sales order, you pass an array of items to SAP, but you also have to pass another array of items that have X flags in them. Like those kind of weird things that you have to figure out over years of SAP integration experience. We're taking that away and giving customers something that works day one, and then they can tweak it to meet their needs. But they no longer have to be well versed in the wizardry of SAP integration.
And again, I think for me, the 25 apps that's great. But actually, what is even more valuable, let me put it like this, are these Power Automate flows. Because maybe I want to build my own app, and then I have the flows that I can rely on. Or even better, let's say I want to do a Teams integration using Power Virtual Agent, and from Power Virtual Agents, I need to create a purchase order in the SAP system. Then now I can use this Power Automated flow, and exactly as you said, I don't need to figure out which X do I need to set and stuff like that. I mean, right now when I do something there, I always start with SE37. So with the on the SAP system, I check out exactly what is the function module doing, what are the parameters that I need to set there, and then once I know it's working in the SAP system, I try to copy and paste the values into my ERP connector just to make sure that I have the right structure available in Power Automate. And now, if there's a template that I can choose, a Power Automate flow template, that says, look, this is the flow to create a purchase order, or this is the flow to, I don't know, create a business partner or whatever. That will take so much work from me because I don't have all this trouble to try out myself what is actually the right setting that is required. And even if I have a ZBAPI on the SAP system, I can still use this probably as a guide, as a reference, and then do some modifications on the flows that we are pre-delivering.
Yeah, regarding that, what you mentioned, Holger. So these flows and those 25 applications, we are delivering that. I think not like a final product. We are just delivering that like as a collection of best practices to help customer to maybe extend that, innovate, and provide something else. Or do we plan to support those applications like final application, or is it just somehow repository of best practices from our side?
Yeah, so we'll have a GitHub repository,
Okay,
and
great.
we think of these kind of as templates. So, you know, the 25 apps and then the corresponding around 100 or 150 flows that support those apps will be available as a solution that you can download and import into your environment. And then you can copy them, change them, do whatever you need to do after that. But it's saving you years and years and years of frustrating research and testing and all that. It just works, and you know, you can tweak it to meet your needs. And one of the things Holger mentioned, so one of the apps that we're pre-delivering after GA is SE37. So it's a Power App that is SE37 that allows you to look
Oh,
at your
really?
BAPIs and explore them and test them and play around with them. So you know, you wouldn't necessarily even need to go into SAP to figure out which BAPI you want to integrate with.
Cool. So you will basically pull the all metadata, so to say, and offer it to
Yep.
the UI. Wow, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so one of the UI enhancements we're actually making to the SAP function too is that these little information icons here, you can click on them and it will display in a pop-up window on the right the definition of that structure or that table within SAP. And it will tell you, you know, what's required, what's not required. So you know, not only are we building a special app to replace SE37, but within the flow itself, you can actually explore the definitions of each of the parameters that SAP is expecting.
Oh, that's really powerful. Yeah.
Some cool stuff. And then finally, some of my favorite, you know, these things didn't take very long for us to develop, but they are hugely important because they save you a lot of time. They are new Logic Apps functions for the unique properties of SAP data. So for those who have ever dealt with leading zeros, which probably 95% of the people watching this podcast have dealt with leading zeros on master data and transaction data before, we have a new simple function that allows you to determine, is your ID for your master data or transactional data alphanumeric or numeric? If it's numeric, then we obviously need to remove the leading zeros before presenting it to Power Apps. Then we need to add the leading zeros back before we send to SAP. So isInt is a new, highly used function within Logic Apps that our Power Automate flows are taking advantage of quite a bit. Things like material, customer ID, vendor ID, you know, you name it. And any piece of master transactional data can sometimes have alphanumeric codes, so we need to be able to account for that. And then some other functions related to some of the unique features within some of the SAP APIs. So, you know, Chunk will take a long text area and split it into fixed length strings so that they can be mapped to the corresponding BAPIs in SAP. So a lot of cool stuff that will just help our customers get faster at their SAP integration and not have to do some crazy workarounds to get the data into SAP.
That's really cool. And I mean, these are Logic Apps functions, but I can still use them also in my Power Automate flow. So if I have a Power App that triggers my Power Automate flow, I call the BAPI, that I can also use these functionalities here.
Yep. So yeah, anytime you see the expression window up here, all of these functions are actually pulled from Logic Apps. So these are Logic Apps functions, but we're constantly adding more and more to these. You know, we have another hugely useful one coming up that's basically a merge of arrays. So say you select you know, some sales orders from the VBAC table within SAP, and then the customer names from KNA1, and you want to merge those arrays together. You can simply say, okay, we're going to merge on KUNNR, which is the customer ID in VBAC, and KUNNR and KNA1, and merge the customer names with the sales order header data and pass it back. So that's a huge time savings in terms of not having to loop over, you know, the arrays and merge them together.
And what I find so fascinating is if you just work with Logic Apps, or if you work with Power Automate, and then you think you have all the right functions already available. But if you come at this from an SAP angle, I mean, if you're not working with SAP, then you probably have never heard about the problem with leading zeros. But I think everyone, as you said, who has worked with SAP has faced this challenge at some point in time. I mean, even though I know that there is the leading zero issue, you wouldn't imagine how often I made the mistake that I do something, I send the data back to SAP, and then it's not working. And then I look at the logs and, oh, of course, I need to add the zeros again or something like that. So these are things that we because of the deep SAP knowledge that you and the team bring into the Power Platform, that's really something that helps make the Power Platform really work well with SAP. And I think it's also these small things that make a huge difference for our customers in this context.
Yeah, to non-SAP people, they're probably looking at this slide and saying, "Yeah, who cares?" But
exactly,
it's a huge time savings.
I mean, Jon, I believe you are oversimplifying. You know, it's not any more complicated SAP stuff here. You know, so.
Yep. Yeah, just making it easy.
Yes, which is a huge value. I mean, for the complicated.
One question when we're discussing about this actually the data governance. Yeah. So what field is about what is data type and what leading zeros are there or not there? Is there, from your opinion, any space to in the future go with Azure Purview in that direction to somehow have the data governance on top of, or as you mentioned, Oracle systems and an SAP systems to help a customer to understand the fields? Because with not
So part of our, now that we're here, there's the question of what's next, and what we really want to focus on are two things. One is to go essentially through every other product offering that Microsoft has and look and say, how can we improve SAP integration there? So, we're working with the Dataverse team right now on virtual tables modeled on top of SAP, but now we're also looking at Microsoft's enterprise data model, and we're looking at how can we bring this into Azure integration services. So there's so many areas that still can benefit from what we've built for the Power Platform. So we'll be busy for quite a while. And then the second part is, how do we take what we've built within Power Apps and extend it to all the other ERP systems that are out there? So we'll be busy.
Great, super.
And then the last thing we want to point people to is we're going to have a learning series on this SAP integration sometime in the February timeframe. But this is really cool is it's going to not only describe from the persona of a flow maker, how do you integrate with SAP, but all the way up to the beginning of your SAP journey, where you may have your VP of operations who says, hey, I want to digitally transform some of these clunky processes that we have, all the way through I'm going live in production. So there are going to be many different paths within this training focused on specific personas, but the intent is, if you're really motivated and you want to digitally transform SAP with the Power Platform, you can do it purely on our learning website without talking to anyone. You can do it on your own time. It'll be completely self-service because we know there are a lot of folks out there like me who don't want to go to a training class. They just want to learn it on their own, maybe on a Saturday afternoon when you're bored, or whenever you want to. It's kind of at your own pace. But this is going to be really cool because it's going to allow people to do some really cool things.
Do you know if we will have a certification? I mean, obviously, I know there's a Power Platform certification, but for example, in the SAP area, from an infrastructure perspective on Azure, we also have an SAP on Azure certification. So do you think it would make sense to also have a Power Platform on SAP, or maybe we can take parts of this and infuse it into the SAP on Azure certification as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a good idea. What's cool about probably 60% of this learning series is that we could literally lift it and copy it over to other areas as well, because a lot of it's really around understanding SAP and how how function modules work and all that fun stuff. So it's not necessarily specific to Power Platform.
Oh, cool.
And that's all I got. So
I have
perfect.
One question. In one of the previous slides, you were referring to RRC read table. RRC with some enhancer. I'm quite exactly special action. I'm curious because I know it. I was trying to use it and it's kind of very castrated RRC. It gets less number of data, so simply probably SAP was optimizing that. Nobody is doing some select star from the universe, So I'm just wondering, what did you do there?
Yep. So this is I can actually show you the action live, so it may take a second for this to load, but oh wow, it's actually pretty fast today. This is our dev environment where we have tons of people in here. But for those who have dealt with RFC read table before, you know that when the data comes back, it's concatenated into a string with a delimiter, which is a huge pain to parse that data. So we've built a special action that does that for you. So basically it ends up looking like a SQL statement, even though it's calling RFC read table, but behind the scenes, it's taking the data fields you've requested and those strings that come back and parsing it cleanly. So you get an array of data back that's ready to use. So we'll kind of show you an example here. If we want to, let's look at read customer, because that's one of my favorites. We spent so much time on this flow that may as well give it some sunlight. So here's an example of what we're talking about. So when you come in here, you can select the fields that you want to be returned and say that I want to add a new field. It will query the entire database table. So even if your Z fields are in there, and then you can just pick, like we've got ZZ Top, a rock band from Houston that's been appended to the customer header table. So I could pick ZZ Top and bring it back. And then the advanced options, this is where you would pass your criteria. So here's our favorite leading zero concept. So KUNNR equal to, and then we have, if it's an integer, I need to format it with 10 leading zeros, and if it's not, if it's alphanumeric, then I just pass it as is. So that handles scenarios where if a customer uses obviously internal numbering or external numbering or both, we can handle it no matter what. But the idea is the response that comes back is already parsed, and these data fields have their values in an array of data.
Wow. And no coding here.
Yep. Yeah, just
it's really great.
Easy stuff.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. I think, again, I know from a lot of customers when the announcement came out that there was a lot of interest in this. And I think the apps, the flows, there can really be a lot of value in this. The new connector with the load balancing functionalities, the single sign-on simplifications. I think we're on a really, really good track there. So I'm really happy that that we are doing this. Good. Anything else? Otherwise, we can wrap it up. So, Jon, thank you so much for joining us. Maybe we can have you back next year sometimes, and maybe you can talk a little about the next cool thing, the next new things that you're doing with the team. Yeah, but
yeah,
thank you so much.
We're never going to be done. Yeah, we'll never be done. There's always going to be new stuff coming out. So,
which is good.
Yep.
Okay, thank you everyone, and see you next time.
See you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.